The Arizona sun blazed overhead, casting a golden glow over the luxurious showroom of Prestige Motors. The glass facade gleamed under the afternoon light, reflecting the rows of high-end vehicles parked out front. Sleek sports cars, powerful SUVs, and elegant sedans, each one polished to perfection. It was a dealership designed to impress, a place where wealth and exclusivity reigned supreme. In the distance, a modest SUV rolled into the parking lot, navigating past the designated spots for high-end clients before pulling into an unmarked space near the back. The driver stepped out, stretching slightly as he surveyed the dealership. He wasn't in a tailored suit or designer shoes. Instead, he wore a simple gray hoodie, slightly worn jeans, and a pair of comfortable sneakers. His name was Daryl Carter. No one inside that showroom knew it yet, but as of last month, he was their new boss. Daryl had made his fortune through smart investments and strategic acquisitions, and Prestige Motors was his latest venture. But today, he wasn't here as the owner. He had come as a silent observer, a man looking to understand the business from the ground up, to see how it truly operated when no one knew the owner was watching. Adjusting the sleeves of his hoodie, he took a deep breath and headed toward the entrance. He could already see the silhouettes of employees inside, gathered near the front desk, chatting and laughing amongst themselves. Through the large glass doors, the hum of casual conversation and occasional bursts of laughter carried into the air. As he stepped inside, the contrast was immediate. The cool, crisp air conditioning replaced the desert heat, carrying with it the faint scent of leather, new car polish, and fresh wax. Rows of luxury vehicles stood proudly under bright showroom lights, their glossy surfaces reflecting the pristine interior. The moment he entered, the atmosphere shifted. The employees' laughter faded, replaced by subtle glances in his direction. Not the friendly kind, but the kind that sized him up. The kind that asked, "Does he belong here?" Daryl had seen that look before. He kept his expression neutral, casually glancing at the cars as if he were just another potential customer. But he wasn't just here to browse. He was here to see if his employees judge people based on their wallets or their appearances. And from the looks of it, today was going to be an interesting day. As Daryl stepped further into the showroom, the air around him seemed to shift. The casual chatter that had filled the space just moments before began to fade, replaced by an almost imperceptible tension. It wasn't outright hostility, nor was it immediate warmth. It was something subtler, a quiet assessment. He could feel it, the way the employees' eyes flicked toward him, their gazes trailing over his hoodie, his jeans, his sneakers. A silent calculation was happening in their heads. And from the brief glances exchanged between them, it was clear they had already made a judgment. Daryl had encountered this reaction before. He knew it well. Then, from across the showroom, she appeared. A woman in her late 40s, dressed in a sharp blazer and perfectly tailored slacks, her heels clicking with authority against the polished floor as she strode toward him. She moved with the practiced confidence of someone in charge, someone used to being in control. A clipboard was tucked firmly under her arm, adding an air of efficiency, of importance. Her name tag read Susan. She stopped just short of him, her lips pulling into a polite, professional smile. But it wasn't a warm smile. It was the kind of smile that was forced, measured, a mask of courtesy stretched just thin enough to reveal the reluctance underneath. "Can I help you with something?" Her voice was clipped, cool, all business. Daryl met her gaze evenly. There was no outright rudeness in her tone, no direct dismissal. But it was there, layered beneath the words, laced between each syllable. He smiled slightly, keeping his posture relaxed. "Just looking around," he said, casually motioning toward the rows of luxury cars. Susan's eyes flicked over him again, and something in her expression shifted. A flicker of doubt, a barely perceptible hesitation. "Are you looking to buy a car?" she asked, her tone just a shade too skeptical. Daryl arched an eyebrow. "Something like that," he said easily, her lips pursed ever so slightly. "Well, we cater to a very specific clientele here," she said, choosing her words carefully. "Most of our inventory requires pre-qualification." The meaning was clear. Daryl tilted his head, feigning curiosity. "Pre-qualification?" Susan nodded, offering a tight smile. Yes, the vehicles we sell start in the six-figure range. We typically ensure that potential buyers meet certain financial requirements before moving forward. There it was, the assumption, the subtle but undeniable implication that he wasn't the type of customer they usually dealt with. That someone dressed the way he was, someone who looked the way he did, couldn't possibly be in the market for a car like this. Daryl let the silence stretch for a moment, watching the way she stood, straight back, clipboard held like a shield, her fingers gripping it just a little too tightly. Then he smiled, a slow, knowing smile. You're assuming I'm not qualified? His voice was calm, almost amused. Susan stiffened slightly, her professional mask slipping for just a second before she quickly recovered. I'm just trying to save you some time, she said, her smile growing a little tighter. We wouldn't want to waste it. Daryl nodded, as if considering her words. That's thoughtful of you, he said, voice still even, still unreadable. Susan's grip on the clipboard shifted. Perhaps I can recommend a dealership that specializes in pre-owned vehicles, she suggested, her tone lighter now, almost as if she were doing him a favor. Daryl's smile didn't waver. That's quite the assumption, he said softly. For the first time, Susan hesitated, just for a second. Then, she straightened her shoulders. I'll be back with a list of options, she said briskly, turning on her heel and walking away. Daryl watched her go, his expression unreadable. He had seen enough. This was going to be very interesting. Susan returned a few minutes later, clipboard still in hand, but this time with a single sheet of paper attached. As she approached, her smile was a little too tight, her posture just a little too stiff. She stopped in front of Daryl and extended the paper toward him. I've compiled a few options that might be more suitable for your situation, she said, her tone carefully measured. Daryl took the paper without a word and unfolded it. His eyes scanned the list. A used sedan, an older SUV, a compact hybrid, all well below the price range of anything Prestige Motors typically sold. His lips twitched slightly, an almost imperceptible flicker of amusement, but he quickly hid it, folding the paper neatly and tucking it into his pocket. Appreciate the effort, he said, his voice even. Susan seemed momentarily thrown off by his calm response, but she quickly recovered, shifting her weight slightly as she rested one hand on her hip. Listen, she said, her voice lowering as if she were sharing a secret. I'm just trying to be realistic with you. Prestige Motors isn't for everyone. I don't want to waste your time. Daryl met her gaze, his expression unreadable. And what exactly makes you think I'm not your target customer? For the first time, Susan hesitated. It was barely a second, but he caught it. The flicker of uncertainty in her eyes before she schooled her expression back into one of polished professionalism. I've been doing this a long time, she said finally. I can tell when someone's out of their depth. Daryl's eyebrows lifted slightly, as if considering her words. Then, he let out a soft chuckle, shaking his head. Interesting, he mused. Susan frowned, her patience beginning to wear thin. Look, she said, her voice clipped. I'm just being honest. It's better to be upfront than to have someone leave disappointed. Daryl tilted his head slightly, his eyes steady on hers. Honest, huh? He said. I like honesty. His expression remained calm, unreadable. Then he smiled faintly. How about this? You let me speak to the owner. Think we can make that happen? Susan blinked, momentarily thrown off. The owner? That's right, Daryl said, his tone light, almost conversational. I'd like to have a word with them. Susan's lips twitched in what could barely pass as a smile. Well, she said slowly, that's not possible today. The owner doesn't just drop by for casual visits. They're a busy person. Daryl nodded slightly, as if he understood completely. I'm sure they are. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. But maybe you could give them a call. Let them know I'm here. I think they'd want to meet me. Susan's smile tightened. She was beginning to lose patience, and it showed. Look, sir, I'm trying to be as polite as possible, but this is getting ridiculous. I have other customers to attend to. If you're serious about buying a car, we can schedule a meeting with one of our sales consultants. Otherwise, Daryl's expression remained neutral, but there was a new edge to his voice now. Otherwise what? Susan's eyes narrowed slightly. Otherwise, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Daryl stood still, his gaze locked onto hers. Around them, the showroom had gone quiet again. A few employees had stopped what they were doing, their attention drawn to the unfolding scene. Daryl let the silence stretch, then, slowly, he reached for his phone. "All right," he said, scrolling through his contacts. "I'll make the call myself." Susan's brow furrowed. "What are you doing?" Daryl lifted the phone to his ear. "Just calling the owner," he replied smoothly. "Shouldn't take long." Susan's confidence faltered. For the first time, there was a flicker of doubt in her expression. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Daryl held up a finger as if to say, "Just a moment," then turned slightly away, speaking into the phone. "Yeah, it's me," he said, his voice calm. "I'm at the dealership. Everything's fine. Just a little misunderstanding. Could you let them know I'm here?" He ended the call and slipped the phone back into his pocket before turning back to Susan. "They'll be here shortly," he said simply. Susan's mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. "Oh, who did you just call?" she asked, her voice quieter now. Daryl didn't answer right away. Instead, he glanced around the showroom, taking in the faces of the staff who were now watching intently. "Guess we'll find out," he said, his tone almost playful. The tension in the room was palpable, the weight of it pressed down on everyone present. Susan shifted uncomfortably, gripping her clipboard just a little tighter. For the first time all day, she wasn't the one in control. The air inside the showroom was thick with tension. A few employees had stopped pretending to work, their eyes darting between Daryl and Susan, sensing that something significant was about to happen. Susan, on the other hand, stood rigid, her grip on the clipboard tight enough to turn her knuckles white. Then, the sound of the main doors swinging open sliced through the silence. A man in a sharp navy suit strode in, his polished shoes clicking against the showroom floor with each purposeful step. His presence commanded attention, not just because of the way he carried himself, but because of the way his eyes immediately locked onto Daryl. And then, in an instant, his serious expression broke into a wide, genuine smile. "Mr. Carter," the man called out, his voice filled with warmth and respect. He reached out a hand as he approached. "So good to see you." Daryl turned, his face calm, composed, as if he had been expecting this. He extended his hand, meeting the man's firm handshake with equal confidence. "Thanks for coming, Alex," Daryl said smoothly. "Appreciate it." Behind them, Susan barely managed to contain her shock. Her clipboard slipped slightly from her grasp as her mouth opened, but no words came out. Her eyes flickered between Daryl and Alex, confusion and disbelief warring on her face. "Mr. Carter," she stammered, the name barely escaping her lips. Alex, still gripping Daryl's hand, turned toward her. His smile faded slightly, replaced with a more professional, almost curt expression. "Yes, Susan," Alex said, his voice firm. "Daryl Carter, the new owner of Prestige Motors." Susan paled. The color drained from her face so quickly it was as if someone had flipped a switch. Her breath caught in her throat, and she took a half step back as if steadying herself. Daryl watched the realization wash over her. The way her posture stiffened, the way her eyes darted as if searching for some explanation, some escape. He gave her a moment, letting the weight of it settle. Then, his voice cut through the silence, calm but deliberate. "Susan," he said, his gaze steady, "if I weren't the owner, would you have treated me any differently?" The question hung in the air like a slow-moving storm. Susan opened her mouth, but no words came out. She blinked, swallowed, as if trying to form a response, but none came. She didn't have to answer. Her silence said everything. The tension inside the showroom lingered, thick and unspoken. Every employee who had been watching the exchange between Daryl and Susan now stood frozen in place, their gazes shifting between the two. Some looked stunned, others curious, but all of them sensed one undeniable truth. Things were about to change. Daryl let the silence stretch for a moment longer before he finally spoke, his tone calm but firm. "I think," he said, glancing toward Alex, It's time we had a conversation about how things are run around here. Alex nodded without hesitation. I'll gather the staff. Within minutes, the employees of Prestige Motors were filing into the sleek glass-walled conference room. The space, usually used for high-level sales meetings and strategy discussions, now felt different. There was a quiet unease in the air, a realization that something fundamental was about to be addressed. Susan took a seat near the back, her clipboard clutched to her lap. Her usual confidence had drained away, replaced by an almost nervous stillness. Darryl stood at the head of the long, polished table, his hands resting lightly on its surface as he looked out at the team before him. "Thank you all for coming on short notice," he began, his voice steady. "For those of you who don't know me yet, my name is Darryl Carter, and as of last month, I am the new owner of Prestige Motors." A murmur rippled through the room. Some employees exchanged glances. Others sat up a little straighter in their chairs. Darryl continued, his gaze scanning the room. "I came here today, dressed casually for a reason. I wanted to see how this dealership operates when no one knows who I am. I wanted to experience firsthand what a potential customer might feel walking through these doors." He let his words settle, pausing just long enough for their weight to sink in. And I have to say, I was disappointed. A few employees shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Susan's hands gripped her clipboard even tighter. "I was judged the moment I walked in," Darryl said plainly. "Not for my interest in the cars, not for the questions I asked, but for how I looked." His voice didn't carry anger, only a quiet certainty that made his message hit even harder. "And I'm not here to single anyone out, but I do want us to think about what that says about the culture of this dealership." The room was silent. Even Alex, who had taken a seat near the door, watched with quiet intensity. "This isn't just about me," Darryl went on. "This is about every person who steps into this showroom. Every customer who doesn't fit into a preconceived mold of what a luxury car buyer should look like. And I want to make one thing clear. This dealership doesn't just sell cars. We build trust. We create relationships. And from now on, that experience will be built on respect, inclusivity, and fairness." One of the younger sales associates hesitated before raising his hand. Darryl nodded toward him. "Mr. Carter," the man began carefully, "I think most of us try to treat customers fairly. But sometimes it's hard not to make assumptions." Darryl gave a small nod. "I get that," he said. "We all have biases, whether we want to admit it or not. But acknowledging them isn't enough. We have to challenge them. We have to actively work to make sure every customer who walks through those doors is treated with the same respect and dignity, no matter what they look like or what they're wearing." He let his gaze drift across the room before landing on Susan. She had been silent the entire time, staring down at her clipboard as if it might somehow shield her from the moment. "Susan," Darryl said, his voice even, "I want to give you the opportunity to speak. Is there anything you'd like to say?" All eyes turned to her. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then, slowly, she exhaled, lifted her head, and met his gaze. She swallowed hard, shifting slightly in her chair. "I made a mistake," she admitted, her voice quieter than usual. "I misjudged you, and for that, I am truly sorry." Darryl didn't react immediately. He let the weight of her words sit in the room before he finally spoke. "Thank you for saying that," he said. "I hope this experience serves as a reminder for all of us, not just you, because change starts with accountability." Susan nodded, her face flushed with quiet embarrassment. Darryl turned back to the group. "Moving forward, we will be implementing new training programs to ensure that Prestige Motors represents the values I believe in. Every customer deserves to be treated with respect. No exceptions. And if anyone has an issue with that," he paused, letting his gaze sweep across the room. "Now's the time to speak up." No one did. The room was silent. Darryl let the quiet stretch just long enough before he nodded. "Good," he said. "I'm glad to see we're all on the same page." His posture remained firm, unwavering. "Change isn't always easy," he continued, "but it's necessary, and this dealership is going to lead by example." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. The tension that had been so thick at the start of the meeting now shifted into something different, something almost like purpose. Even Alex, who had been standing quietly, gave a small nod of approval. Daryl looked towards Susan one last time. "You're an experienced manager," he said, "and I'm sure you've worked hard to get where you are. But today was a wake-up call. For you. For all of us." Susan nodded again, this time more firmly. "I understand," she said, her voice steady. "I was wrong, and I'll do whatever it takes to make this right." Daryl studied her for a moment before nodding. "I believe in second chances," he said simply. "But accountability comes first. We'll meet one-on-one to discuss next steps. For now, let's focus on moving forward." He turned back to the rest of the team. "We're not just selling cars here," he said. "We're selling trust. We're setting a standard. And from this day forward, that standard will be built on respect." There was a pause. Then one by one, the employees nodded. A few murmured in agreement. Even those who had been skeptical at the start now looked like they understood. Daryl allowed himself a small, faint smile. It wasn't victory. It wasn't relief. It was the beginning of something better. "All right," he said finally, exhaling. "Let's get back to work." The atmosphere inside the conference room had shifted. The tension that had once filled the space, thick and unspoken, was beginning to ease. Where there had been doubt, there was now quiet determination. Where there had been hesitation, there was now the first flicker of change. One by one, the employees of Prestige Motors nodded, their expressions ranging from thoughtful to resolute. They had listened. They had understood. And most importantly, they were ready to do better. Alex, who had remained at the back of the room, stepped forward slightly, his arms still crossed, but his posture more relaxed now. He looked at Daryl, a small smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Well," he said, his tone lighter now, "that was probably the most productive meeting this dealership has had in a long time." A few employees chuckled softly, and the energy in the room lifted just a little. It wasn't just about the meeting anymore. It was about what came next. Daryl nodded, his expression calm, yet firm. "This isn't just about today," he said. "This is about what we do moving forward." His gaze swept across the room, landing on each person before him. "The way we treat people matters more than anything we sell. And that starts now." There was another round of nods, a quiet ripple of agreement that carried more weight than words ever could. Susan, still seated near the back, finally let out a slow breath, the tension in her shoulders easing slightly. She had made a mistake, one she wouldn't forget, but she had also been given a chance to learn, to do better, and she wasn't going to waste it. As the employees slowly began rising from their seats, filing out of the room, Alex clapped a hand on Daryl's shoulder. "You've got a hell of a job ahead of you," he said, his voice carrying the hint of a challenge. "But I have a feeling you're going to pull it off." Daryl gave a small, knowing smile. "I didn't come here just to own a dealership," he replied. "I came here to build something better." He turned back toward the room one last time, watching as his employees, his team, exchanged quiet words with one another, some still deep in thought, others already discussing the changes ahead. They weren't just workers anymore. They were part of something bigger. As he stepped toward the door, he paused, glancing back one last time. His voice was steady, clear, leaving them with a final message that would linger long after he had gone. "We don't judge our customers by how they look," he said. "We judge them by how we treat them." Silence followed, not heavy like before, but reflective, meaningful. And with that, he stepped out of the conference room, back into the heart of the showroom. The polished cars gleamed under the bright overhead lights, their reflections dancing across the spotless floors. Everything looked the same as it had when he first arrived, but he knew it wasn't. Change had begun. There was still work to do and a long road ahead. But for the first time that day, Daryl felt something new. Optimism. He took one last look around the dealership, then walked forward toward the future he was ready to build. If this story made you think, don't just scroll away. Take action. Like this video to help spread awareness. Share it with your friends and family, because conversations spark change. Comment below and tell us your thoughts. Have you ever witnessed an abuse of power? Let's talk about it. Follow our channel for more powerful real-life stories. And turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Change starts with awareness. Awareness starts with you. Be part of the movement.